Service businesses and product businesses look similar from the outside. Both generate revenue. Both serve customers. Both require work to build and maintain. But they operate on fundamentally different economics, different relationships between the owner's time and the output, different scaling properties, different ceilings. And the difference isn't about which is better, it's about what each one actually is, structurally, and what that structure means for how far it can grow and what it costs to get there. A service business sells expertise and time. The client pays for access to a person's knowledge, skill, and effort, applied to a specific problem over a specific period. The value delivered exists only through the delivery. The lawyer who doesn't show up hasn't delivered the legal service. The consultant who doesn't analyze hasn't delivered the insight. The designer who doesn't create hasn't delivered the design. The service is inseparable from the act of delivering it, which means the service business is fundamentally tied to human presence and capacity. More revenue requires more capacity. More capacity requires more people. And more people require management, coordination, quality control, all of which consume more of the owner's time, even as they're meant to reduce it. A product business operates differently. The product exists independent of the seller. It was created once. It sits on a shelf, physical or digital. It can be sold again and again without the creator being present for each transaction. The economics of this are structurally different from the service model. The cost of creating the product is incurred once, or periodically. The cost of selling the next unit is marginal, or zero, which means revenue can scale without a proportional increase in the owner's time or the business's costs. 1,000 units sold doesn't require 1,000 hours of the owner's presence. It requires the product to exist and a mechanism to deliver it. These structural differences produce different financial profiles. Service businesses typically have high revenue per transaction because each transaction involves significant human effort. But they also have high cost of delivery because that human effort is the primary input. Margins can be strong, but they require managing capacity carefully. And growth requires adding capacity, people, time, expertise, which is expensive and complex. Product businesses typically have lower revenue per transaction, but potentially much higher margins at scale, because the cost of the product doesn't increase proportionally with the number of units sold. A software product sold to 10,000 users costs roughly the same to maintain as one sold to 1,000 users, but generates 10 times the revenue. Most people who start businesses start service businesses, not because they've thought through the economics, but because a service business is the most accessible entry point. You have a skill. Someone will pay for it. You start selling the skill. And the service business begins, with all of its structural properties, including the ceiling, without the owner necessarily understanding what they've built or what it will cost to change it later. Understanding the structural difference between service and product economics doesn't mean avoiding service businesses. It means knowing what you're building and making deliberate decisions about how to change the structure over time. Every service business has a ceiling. Not a ceiling determined by the market, not a ceiling determined by the owner's capability, a ceiling determined by the structure of the model itself. And understanding that ceiling, precisely, structurally, is what allows a service business owner to build deliberately towards something different. The ceiling exists because of capacity. Revenue in a service business is a function of how many hours of service can be delivered in a given period, and what each hour commands in the market. Both variables have limits. The rate per hour is limited by what the market will pay for the specific service and expertise. It can be raised through better positioning, higher value clients, specialization, but it has a ceiling determined by market dynamics. The hours are limited by the number of people delivering the service and the number of hours each can sustain. For a solo service business, the ceiling is the owner's hours multiplied by their rate. For a service business with employees, the ceiling expands with each person added. But so does the complexity, the management overhead, the quality control requirement, the coordination cost. Adding people is the standard solution to the service ceiling, and it works to a point. A law firm grows by adding lawyers. A consulting firm grows by adding consultants. An agency grows by adding specialists. But adding people creates a different constraint. The business that scales through headcount isn't escaping the time for money model. It's replicating it across more people. The owner's personal time ceiling expands because others are now delivering the service. But the business's ceiling is now determined by the aggregate of those people's hours and by the owner's capacity to manage them. At some point, the management of the people consumes the owner's time as much as the service delivery did, and the business is now constrained by the owner's ability to manage capacity, not their ability to deliver service. A different ceiling, but still a ceiling. The margin structure creates a second problem. In most service businesses, the primary cost is people. Labor is the input, revenue is the output. The difference between them is the margin. And as the business grows, as more people are added to deliver more service, the ratio between labor cost and revenue often stays roughly constant, or worsens, as management overhead is added, as the coordination cost of a larger team consumes resources that don't directly generate revenue. The business earns more in absolute terms, but the margin per unit of output, per hour of service delivered, doesn't improve substantially. Which means the ceiling on profitability scales with the ceiling on capacity, but the ratio between them doesn't change as dramatically as the revenue does. This is the fundamental tension of the service model at scale. It can grow, but the growth requires proportional investment in the capacity that delivers it. Unlike a product business, where the next unit of revenue costs incrementally less to produce than the last, the service business requires roughly the same investment per unit of revenue, regardless of how big it gets. Not always, not without exception, but structurally. And the businesses that escape this constraint, the service businesses that achieve disproportionate revenue relative to their labor cost, do so by changing the structure, by introducing elements that break the link between time and revenue. That's not easy, but it's the direction that turns a service business ceiling into something higher. Pause for a second. If you're still listening, it's probably because this didn't feel exaggerated. That's intentional. If this way of thinking matters to you, like the video, subscribe. We'll keep going deeper. The service businesses that scale past the time constraint don't do so by working harder, or by adding more people faster, or by charging more per hour. They do so by changing the structure, by deliberately introducing elements that break the link between time delivered and revenue generated. That structural change doesn't happen automatically. It requires deliberate decisions about how the service gets packaged, priced, and delivered. The first structural move is productization. A productized service takes what was custom work, done differently for each client, and converts it into a standardized offering. Same deliverable, same process, same outcome, delivered repeatedly without custom decisions for each engagement. Productization removes the cognitive work from each delivery, and the cognitive work The thinking, the customization, the judgment is what makes service delivery time-intensive. Remove the customization, or systematize it, and the delivery becomes templatable, delegatable, potentially automatable. The service still gets delivered, but the delivery requires less of the owner's specific presence for each instance. The second structural move is separating pricing from time. Most service businesses price by the hour or by the project, which ties revenue directly to time. More time, more revenue. Less time, less revenue. Value-based pricing breaks that link. The price reflects the outcome the client receives, not the time required to produce it. A tax strategy that saves a client $200,000 is worth a significant fee, regardless of whether it took 20 hours or 2 hours. The client is paying for the outcome. The time is the owner's internal cost to produce it. As the owner systematizes the delivery, as the process becomes faster through repetition and tooling, the same outcome gets produced in less time. The revenue stays constant, the margin expands, and the margin funds the next layer of systematization, which reduces the time further, which expands the margin further. The third structural move is leverage through other people or technology. Not just hiring, leverage. There's a difference between hiring people to do what the owner used to do, which replicates the time for money model at scale, and structuring the business so that other people or technology multiply the owner's output. A consultant who builds a methodology and licenses it, teaches it, or certifies others to deliver it has created leverage. Their thinking now generates revenue through other people's delivery, without their direct presence in each engagement. A service business that builds software tools to automate part of its delivery has created leverage. The tool does in minutes what used to take hours. The revenue stays constant, the cost falls. In both cases, the owner's time is no longer the primary constraint on revenue. Something else is doing the scaling work. These structural moves don't eliminate the service business, they evolve it. The business still delivers service, still has clients, still requires expertise and execution. But the relationship between the owner's hours and the revenue becomes less direct, less proportional, less constrained by the ceiling that the original service model imposed. And the business that evolves this way doesn't just earn more. It builds a different kind of asset, one that doesn't require the owner's continuous presence to sustain itself, one that produces with less input per dollar of output, one that is, structurally, closer to a business than to an extended second job. The decision between service and product isn't binary. Most successful businesses contain elements of both. They deliver service, because service is where trust gets built, where deep client relationships develop, where the specific expertise that differentiates the business gets applied. And they build product, because product is where leverage lives, where revenue grows beyond the owner's hours, where the business develops assets that produce without continuous input. The question isn't which model to choose, it's how to combine them deliberately, and when to introduce the product elements that change the economics. Most businesses start as pure service. That's not wrong. Service is where expertise gets validated, where the market tells you what it will pay for what you know, where the specific problems you're best positioned to solve reveal themselves. The early service phase is information gathering as much as it is revenue generation. What do clients consistently need? What part of the delivery is most valuable? What problems come up repeatedly that you're solving from scratch each time? The answers to those questions are the raw material for the product layer that comes later. The repeated problems become the standardized solution. The repeated delivery becomes the productized offer. The repeated knowledge becomes the course, the tool, the framework. The timing of the transition matters. Introducing product elements too early, before the service has validated what the market actually needs, produces products that miss the market. Introducing them too late, after the service ceiling has become a source of frustration rather than a feature, leaves years of potential leverage uncaptured. The right moment is when the patterns are clear, when the service has repeated enough to reveal what's consistent, what clients always need, what the delivery always requires, what the expertise always produces. That consistency is the signal. The product layer is the response to it. The product layer doesn't have to be large to change the economics. A small, productized offering, a standardized package, a template sold once and reused, a tool built for internal use that can be sold externally, changes the relationship between the owner's time and the business's revenue, even modestly, even at a fraction of total revenue. Because once some revenue is coming from something that doesn't require hours to produce, the economics of the business are different. Not dramatically yet, but structurally. And structural differences compound over time. The product layer that represents 5% of revenue today can represent 50% in 5 years, as the service systematizes and the product scales. Understanding the economics of both models, their structural properties, their ceilings, the specific moves that change them, is what allows a service business owner to build deliberately towards something that doesn't cap at their hours. Not by abandoning the service, by evolving the structure around it. Adding product where the service reveals the opportunity. Adding leverage where the delivery reveals the pattern. Adding systems where the operations reveal the repetition. The business that results isn't a pure service business anymore, and it isn't a pure product business either. It's something that compounds, that produces beyond the owner's hours, that builds position rather than just converting time into income. If this shifted something for you, subscribe. Like this if it clarified something.